My name is Willow Carrington. I'm 30 years old, and I make a living with my hands: carpentry, handcrafted woodwork, the kind of pieces people run their fingertips over and say, "This feels like it has a soul." 2 years ago today, something happened that split my life clean in half. Before that day, my world was simple. Not easy, just simple. My workshop sat deep in the forest outside Bitterroot, Montana, about 7 miles from my parents' house. Close enough that, in theory, I could call them if something happened. Far enough that if something did happen, I'd have no choice but to rely on myself. The shop was my sanctuary. The air always smelled like pine and sawdust. The rhythmic hum of the saw blended with the soft sounds of the woods outside, wind moving through branches, birds shifting somewhere above the roof. And Rusty, my old dog, would lie on the porch like he owned the sunlight. I loved the work, the way a rough, splintered piece of wood could become something clean and finished under steady hands, the way every mistake could be sanded down, shaped, forgiven. Wood made sense. People didn't. That morning, everything started like any other day. I remember tightening my ponytail, slipping my gloves on, checking the measurements twice. I remember Rusty thumping his tail once when I scratched behind his ears. And I remember thinking, briefly, stupidly, that maybe life was finally settling. Then the saw slipped. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a half second of wrong pressure, wrong angle. Then the pain hit, a hot, tearing bolt up my arm. I looked down and blood gushed like a fountain, staining the wooden floor a deep, sick red. For a moment, my brain refused to name what my eyes were seeing, like if I didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't be true. Then my left hand went numb. My breath turned into a broken sound, somewhere between a scream and a sob. "There's no one here," I remember thinking, stumbling backward. No one but me. And Rusty. Without thinking, I tore off my flannel shirt. I ripped a strip with my teeth, wrapped it around my hand, pulled tight. The fabric turned red instantly. I tightened it harder, pain shooting up my arm so sharp my vision sparked. I had to stop the bleeding. I had to stay conscious. The workshop that had always felt like safety suddenly felt like a trap. Wooden walls closing in, the forest outside too far away, my own heartbeat pounding like a warning siren in my ears. My fingers shook as I fumbled for my phone. Blood made the screen slick. My thumb slid, missed, tried again. I hit my mom's contact. The phone rang. Once. Twice. I pressed my shoulder against the wall to keep myself upright. "Mom!" I choked out the second she picked up, voice hoarse and desperate. "Please come. Now. I had an accident." The saw slipped. It cut deep into my left hand. There's so much blood. I waited for panic, for urgency, for her saying my name the way mothers say it when they're terrified. Instead, her tone was light, almost indifferent. "Don't worry, Willow. Just wait a little bit." And then, the dry, hollow sound of the call ending. I stared at the phone like it had betrayed me, like it had swallowed the part where she was supposed to care. I told myself they'd come. I told myself maybe she was already grabbing her keys. Maybe she didn't realize how serious it was. But somewhere deep inside me, under the shock, under the pain, another fear screamed louder than the wound itself. What if they never come? 15 minutes passed. My shop was only 7 miles from their house, less than a 10-minute drive. My vision blurred, my head spun with blood loss. I redialed. No answer. Again. Nothing. I tried to breathe slowly, like that could keep my body from shutting down. Like calm could glue me back together. Then my phone rang. Logan. My younger brother. The name flashed across my screen like a cruel joke. For a second, hope flared. Maybe he'd heard. Maybe he was on his way. My fingers trembled as I answered. "Logan." But the voice on the other end was slurred, thick with alcohol and excitement. Hey, Will," he laughed, drawing out the wrong name like he wasn't even sure who he was talking to. "This contract, man, this contract is insane." I froze. "Logan?" A lazy chuckle. Oh, Willow, my bad. Guess I dialed the wrong number." "Wrong number." I swallowed, tasting copper, not sure if it was blood or rage. "Logan, what are you doing?" He laughed again, carefree, weightless. "Party's amazing. Everyone's celebrating me. You know what Mom and Dad said? They've never been prouder of me than they are right now." Then I heard it, in the background. My mother's voice, bright and excited, like the woman I'd always begged her to be for me. "Logan, raise your glass. I want a picture of you with Uncle Rick." And my father's booming laughter. "Our boy finally made it, a real star." The room on the other end sounded warm, full, alive. And I was on my workshop floor, pressed against a wall, bleeding through cloth, trying not to pass out. Something inside me turned to ice. Not because they were celebrating, but because they were celebrating instead of coming. They hadn't ignored me because they didn't hear the call. They ignored me because Logan's moment mattered more, even if my life was slipping away. A few minutes later, my breathing grew heavier. My heartbeat felt slower, like my body was already deciding how much effort I was worth. And that's when the memories came. Not gentle ones, not the kind you hold close, the kind that arrive like a flood, tearing down the walls you built just to survive. Logan was always the center of everything. 3 years younger than me. Sharp, charismatic, effortless. He thrived in the spotlight like he was born under it. I worked in quiet. He collected applause. I remembered the day he won his first high school trophy. Football, of course. My parents hung it in the center of the living room where anyone who walked in could see it. When guests came over, Dad would stand beneath it like it was a shrine and slap Logan on the shoulder. "That's my boy," he'd say, beaming. "Best player on the team." Once I held that trophy in my hands. Just for a second. I ran my fingers over the polished metal surface. It was heavy, like something that had never been meant for me. And I remember wishing, just once, that my father would rest his hand on my shoulder like that. That he'd tell someone he was proud of me too. But my mother snatched the trophy from my hands so fast it startled me. "Don't touch that. It's Logan's. Be careful. You might drop it." She spoke like my touch alone could ruin him. I never had a trophy. No applause. No photos. And now, bleeding out to vision fading, I wasn't even worth a 10-minute drive. Rusty's frantic barking yanked me back from the haze. It wasn't a normal bark. It was an alarm. A warning. Desperate and sharp, like he understood exactly what was happening. Then, the workshop door burst open. A voice cut through the fog. "Willow, oh my God, what happened to you?" It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It wasn't Logan. It was Jonah Mercer, my neighbor from a few houses down. He stormed in like a man who had sprinted the whole way, chest heaving, eyes wide with shock as he took in the blood, the cloth, the way I was slumped against the wall like my bones had turned to water. I tried to speak, tried to smile. Nothing came out but a weak breath. Jonah dropped to his knees beside me, jaw clenched as he checked my hand. "Rusty's been barking nonstop for 20 minutes, he said tightly. "I thought someone broke in. I came to check." Rusty was still growling, but the second he saw my eyes open fully, he whimpered and pressed his nose against me, warm and shaking. Jonah wrapped another cloth around my wound, tighter than before. I hissed through my teeth. "You've lost too much blood," he said. No hesitation, no debate. "I'm taking you to the hospital, now." And as he hauled me up, steady and sure, like this was the most natural thing in the world, I realized something that would haunt me long after the stitches healed. The person who came running wasn't family. It was someone who owed me nothing, and somehow that made it hurt worse, because it proved they could have come. They just didn't want to. The hospital lights were too bright. They weren't the warm kind of bright either. Nothing soft, nothing comforting. They were harsh, clinical. Like the world wanted to make sure I could see every last detail of what my life had become. Jonah stayed with me through triage. He filled out paperwork with a steadiness that didn't match the adrenaline still vibrating in my veins. Rusty wasn't supposed to be inside, but Jonah argued until they finally relented and let him wait with a nurse near the entrance. I remember the doctor's hands more than his face. Gloves, gauze, pressure. And then the stitching started. Each needle prick felt like a spark, but the physical pain didn't scare me nearly as much as the quiet question pulsing under it. If Jonah hadn't come, would I be dead right now? When the doctor finally stepped back, he said something about me being lucky, about the saw missing anything major. But when he said the word nerve, my stomach sank like a stone. He pulled a chair close and sat across from me, like the next sentence was going to change my entire future. "Willow," he said gently, "the cut didn't hit a major artery. That's why you're still here, but there's nerve damage." I stared at him. The room hummed. Machines, footsteps, distant voices, like the hospital itself was breathing without me. He continued carefully, "You may not regain full dexterity in that hand. We'll monitor it. Physical therapy can help, but there's a chance you won't be able to hold tools the same way again." Hold tools. My throat went dry. "A hammer?" I asked, voice barely recognizable. "A chisel?" He didn't answer with words. He answered with the look doctors give when they're trying to soften a truth that can't be softened. I looked down at my hand wrapped in stark white bandages. My hand, my work, my identity. The thing that made me, me. I didn't cry. Not then. It felt like my body had decided it couldn't afford tears. Not when it was still trying to keep me alive. Jonah sat nearby, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the floor like he was quietly furious, at a world that could do this to someone in a single careless moment. "Do you want me to call anyone?" he asked after a while, voice low. For a second, I thought he meant Ethan, but then he glanced at my phone on the bedside table, and I understood. "My parents?" I let out a hollow laugh that didn't sound like me. "I already did." Jonah's head snapped up. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. If I met his eyes, the humiliation would swallow me whole. "I called them when it happened," Bout, I said, words slow, measured, like I was reading my own autopsy report. "My mom told me to wait, then she hung up." Jonah's jaw tightened. "And then Logan called me by accident," I continued. "He was drunk. They were all celebrating him. Champagne, pictures, Dad laughing like he had a son worth loving." Jonah sat very still. Then he said quietly, "You nearly died." I didn't answer, because if I answered, I'd have to say, yes, and they knew, and they still didn't come. That night, after Jonah finally went home and Rusty was brought back to me, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Not my parents. Not Logan. Ethan. Ethan Hale, my boyfriend. He'd been out of town on a job for 2 days, stuck in a place with spotty reception. The kind of bad timing life loves to deliver when you're already on your knees. Missed calls. Texts stacked on each other like panic. "Willow? Baby, are you okay? Why aren't you answering? I just got service. Call me now, please." My thumb hovered over the screen, and I realized something. Ethan would have come. Ethan would have dropped everything. And somehow that made the absence from my parents feel even uglier, like a bruise you keep touching just to prove it's real. I called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. "Willow?" His voice cracked with relief and fear. "Oh my God, where are you?" "I'm at the hospital," I whispered. "What? Why? What happened?" When I told him, there was a pause, one sharp inhale, and then anger. "Not at me. At them. At your parents," he said, voice tight. "You called them and they didn't come?" I shut my eyes. They were busy. "Busy doing what?" he demanded. I didn't want to say it. Saying it made it heavier. But I forced the truth out anyway. "Celebrating Logan." A silence so thick it felt like it had weight. Then Ethan exhaled slowly, like he was trying to keep himself from breaking something. "I'm coming home," he said. "I'm leaving right now." "You can't," I murmured. "It's late. You're hours away." "I don't care." His voice dropped. "I'm not letting you sit in a hospital alone." The words hit me in the chest. Alone. Because that's what I'd always been, hadn't I? Even when I was surrounded by people who shared my last name. When we hung up, my eyes finally burned. The tears came without permission. But I swallowed them back. I refused to cry in a bed that smelled like antiseptic and betrayal. The next morning, the doctor checked my hand again. The bandages were changed. The room smelled like alcohol wipes and clean gauze. Rusty's head rested against my leg like a warm apology for the world. My phone buzzed again. This time the caller ID made my heart jerk. "Dad!" For one single breath, hope flared like a match. Maybe he's calling to ask if I'm okay. Maybe he feels guilty. Maybe, I answered. "Dad!" His voice cut through my hope like a blade. "Willow, your mother and I need extra money." I blinked. "What?" "Logan has travel coming up," he continued, brisk and practical. "Tournament. Opportunities. We're a little short this month. You'll send it today." I didn't speak for a second because my brain refused to accept what it was hearing. He wasn't asking. He was ordering, like I was still his quiet little resource. Like my blood on the workshop floor was an inconvenience, not a tragedy. My throat tightened. "Dad," I said slowly, "I almost died." A sigh, annoyed. "Willow, don't start," he snapped. My stomach dropped lower. "You were 7 miles away," I whispered. I called. Mom picked up. I told her I was bleeding. She told me to wait and hung up. Silence. Not guilt. Not shock. Just impatience. Then my father said it. The sentence that changed something inside me permanently. "It was just a cut. Just a cut." I stared at the wall, my vision going sharp with rage. Just a cut. Like it hadn't been my life spilling onto wood. Like Jonah hadn't carried me to his truck while I went gray and dizzy. Like a doctor hadn't warned me I might never hold my tools the same way again. My fingers tightened around the phone. My voice shook, not from weakness, but from the effort it took not to scream. "You called," I said, each word deliberate, "not to ask if I'm alive, but to demand money for Logan." My father's tone turned colder. "Stop making everything about you. This family supports each other. Logan has a future. You're being selfish." Selfish. I actually laughed. It came out bitter and broken. "This family doesn't support me," I said. "This family uses me." On the other end, my father made a sound, like I was exhausting. And then the line went dead. He hung up on me. Again. I sat there in the hospital bed, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the empty hum of nothing. Rusty lifted his head and whined softly, sensing the shift in me. Jonah came back later that afternoon with coffee and a small paper bag of muffins, like he was trying to patch the world with sugar and kindness. He took one look at my face and didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. The shame was written all over me. I waited until Jonah stepped out to talk to a nurse. Then I opened my banking app. My injured hand trembled as I held the phone with my other one. For years, I'd been sending my parents money every month. Not because they truly needed it, because they expected it. Because I kept chasing the lie that if I gave enough, I'd finally become worth loving. I scrolled to the automatic transfer set for the first of every month. My thumb hovered over the button. A part of me hesitated, not because I wanted to keep paying, but because canceling it felt like admitting the truth. They will never choose you. My breath came out shaky. Then I pressed cancel. A confirmation popped up. I tapped confirm. And just like that, one small movement of my thumb, something in my life ended. It didn't feel like freedom. Not yet. It felt like grief. A few days later, I was discharged. Ethan met me at the hospital entrance, his face pale from the drive, eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. He wrapped his arms around me carefully, like I was made of glass. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into my hair. I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. We drove back to the workshop, Rusty curled in the back seat like a guardian. At home, I spent days sprawled on the couch, bandaged hand aching with every tiny movement. The workshop sat there like an old friend I was afraid to look at. Because what if I couldn't return to it? What if the one thing that made me feel solid in this world was gone? 2 weeks later, my hand had improved a little. Not enough, but something. I sat in the dim light of the workshop, surrounded by wood shavings and silence. I stared at my bandages, once white, now slightly yellowed at the edges. A reminder. A warning. Ethan hovered in the doorway like he wanted to say something but didn't want to push. Jonah's coffee sat on the table, already cooling. Rusty's eyes followed me, unblinking. I reached for a chisel. The moment my fingers closed around it, pain flared up my arm, sharp and hot. My hand trembled. I almost dropped it. Ethan took a step forward. "Willow, maybe—" "Don't," I said softly. Not harsh. Just final. Because this wasn't about being careful. This was about proving to myself I was still here. I pressed the chisel into the wood. Slow. Shaky. The first cut wasn't clean. It didn't glide the way it used to. But it cut. I kept going, teeth clenched, ignoring the sting. Physical pain was nothing compared to being abandoned. Every slice into that wood became a sentence I carved into my own survival. I don't need them. Hours later, when I finally leaned back, there was a small wooden bear sitting on my workbench. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. A soft exhale filled the workshop. I looked up and saw Jonah leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're as stubborn as ever," he said, but there was something warm in his voice. Ethan stood behind him, quieter, his gaze fixed on the bear like he was seeing the shape of my resilience for the first time. I didn't smile. Not fully, but something inside me loosened. Maybe I couldn't be the same Willow I'd been before. Maybe that version of me, who kept begging my parents to notice her, had died on that workshop floor. But another version was being carved out now. Slower, stronger, and far less willing to bleed for anyone who wouldn't even drive 7 miles. The pounding on my workshop door didn't sound like concern. It sounded like entitlement. Rusty was the first to react. He sprang off the couch with a deep, guttural growl, low and warning. The same sound he'd made the day Jonah found me bleeding on the floor. My hand throbbed as I stood up. The bandages pulled tight, a sharp reminder of how close I'd come to disappearing. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, my parents stood there like a storm that had finally found the address it was looking for. My father's face was hard, jaw clenched, like he'd rehearsed his anger the entire drive. My mother stood slightly behind him, lips pressed thin, eyes darting around the workshop like she was assessing damage. Not to me, to the space. "You can't just cut off the money like that," my father barked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We raised you." The words hit me like an insult wrapped in history. I didn't answer right away. I looked at them, really looked. No panic in their eyes. No relief that I was alive. Just irritation. My right hand clenched into a fist. The injured one trembled at my side. "You raised me," I repeated slowly, "and then you left me bleeding on the floor." My mother winced, not from guilt, from discomfort. "That's not fair," she muttered. "You're exaggerating." I laughed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it was cold. "I called you," I said. "I told you I was losing blood. You told me to wait. Then you hung up." My father scoffed. "We didn't know it was that serious." "You knew I was hurt," I shot back. You knew I was alone, and you still chose to stay home and toast Logan. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My mother finally spoke, voice small. Logan needed us more that night. Something in my chest snapped clean in half. Needed you for what? I demanded. To clap? To drink champagne? To pretend he's still your golden boy while you keep pouring money into him like it's a bottomless well? My father's face darkened. Watch your tone. I took a step forward, meeting his gaze head on. I was dying, I said, my voice shaking but unbroken, and you didn't come. For the first time, they didn't interrupt me. They didn't defend themselves. They just looked away. That told me everything. Get out, I said quietly. My father blinked. What? You heard me. My voice steadied, hardened. Get out of my workshop. My mother's eyes widened. Willow? Now. They stood there, stunned, like the idea of me refusing them had never occurred to them before. But they didn't argue, because they knew something had shifted. They turned and walked out. When the door slammed behind them, the sound echoed through the workshop like a gunshot. Rusty barked once, a single final warning. I sank onto the bench, heart racing, lungs burning. Ethan hovered nearby, his face tight. I didn't know it was that bad, he said quietly. I nodded. Most people don't. They see the surface, not the rot underneath. He hesitated. They're still your parents. I looked at him, really looked, and saw something important. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He just didn't understand what it meant to grow up invisible. They stopped being that the moment they left me there, I said. He didn't argue again. Months passed. Not a call, not a text, not even an angry voicemail. At first, the silence hurt. Then it became peaceful. My days settled into a new rhythm. Therapy appointments. Slow, careful carving. Jonah stopping by with coffee like it was a ritual. Rusty aging a little more each month, his muzzle turning whiter, his movements slower, but still following me everywhere. Ethan tried to be supportive, but there was a distance now. Not between us, between our understandings of family. He grew up with parents who argued but showed up. Mine showed up only when they wanted something. Then, exactly 1 year ago, the knock came again. Sharp, insistent. Rusty growled before I even stood up. I opened the door. My parents were back. They looked tired, older. But there was something else there, too. Purpose. My father didn't waste time. Willow, you need to sell this workshop. I stared at him. Excuse me? My mother jumped in, words spilling fast like she'd practiced them in the car. Logan has an incredible opportunity, she said eagerly. He's planning to open a football training academy for young talent. It's a golden investment. I crossed my arms. How much? She swallowed. 300,000. The number sat between us like a bomb. You want me, I said slowly, to sell the one thing I built with my own hands? To gamble on Logan's dream? My father nodded. Yes, this is a life-changing opportunity. You're wasting your time in this rundown shop. If you invest in Logan, you can stop working and live comfortably. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. No. My mother frowned. Willow, you're being short-sighted. No, I said again, firmer. You're being desperate. My father's voice hardened. The family needs you. You can't turn your back on Logan now. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. What a brilliant plan. Jonah. He stood in the doorway of his own place next door, arms crossed, eyes sharp. You want Willow to sell the one thing she has, he continued coolly, to fund a business run by someone who's never done anything but burn through your money. My father scowled. This doesn't concern you. Jonah shrugged. I wasn't planning to interfere, but when I hear someone being pressured into giving up everything for someone else's pipe dream, I can't stay quiet. He stepped closer, facing them head on. For years, Jonah said. What has Willow done for you? She worked. She sent you money every month. Meanwhile, Logan lived off it. My mother's face flushed red. That's not true. Then prove me wrong, Jonah shot back. What has Logan built? What has he ever finished? Silence. Heavy. Damning. I stepped forward. I'm not selling the workshop, I said calmly, and I suggest you leave before you lose more than just my money. My father clenched his fists. For a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he turned away. My mother hesitated, then followed him out without a word. Rusty barked as the door closed. Jonah looked at me, narrowing his eyes. Don't let them come back a fourth time. I smirked faintly. They won't get the chance. I believed that. I really did. But I underestimated how far my parents were willing to fall, as long as it was for Logan. And I had no idea yet what price they were about to pay. I thought refusing them would end it. I thought that drawing a clear line, one they couldn't step over without losing me completely, would finally make them stop. I was wrong. My parents had never respected boundaries. They only respected leverage. Weeks passed after that confrontation, Then months. No calls, no messages, no sudden appearances at my door. Life settled again. Slow mornings, aching fingers, the soft scrape of chisel against wood. Jonah's coffee showing up like clockwork. Ethan trying, in his own way, to understand a world where family didn't mean safety. Rusty slept more now. Sometimes I caught him watching me with cloudy eyes, like he was memorizing me. I almost let myself believe the storm had passed. Then one morning, Jonah came over earlier than usual. He didn't bring coffee. That was how I knew something was wrong. He stood just inside the workshop, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, gaze fixed on the floor like he was deciding how much truth I could handle in one dose. "Willow," he said carefully, "there's something you should know." I set the chisel down. "What is it?" He exhaled. "Your parents mortgaged their house." The words didn't register at first. "They what?" "3 weeks ago," he continued, "they took out a loan, $300,000. The exact amount they'd asked me for." My stomach dropped. "For Logan?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jonah nodded once. "For the academy." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Of course they did." He looked at me sharply. "You're not surprised?" "No," I said. "I'm disappointed I ever thought they'd choose differently." Jonah hesitated. It failed. I closed my eyes. Not because I was shocked, but because I knew what came next. "They got a foreclosure notice," he said quietly. "If they don't repay the loan in 2 weeks, the bank takes the house." The workshop felt very still. Too still. I leaned back against the workbench, arms crossed, breathing slow and even. "Are you okay?" Jonah asked. I thought about it. About the house where I grew up. The living room where Logan's trophies hung like proof I didn't belong. The kitchen table where my achievements were dismissed as nice hobbies. The hallway where I learned to walk quietly so I wouldn't be accused of wanting attention. "I'm fine," I said honestly. Jonah studied me. "Are you going to help them?" There it was. The question everyone always asked. Not should they be helped, but will you sacrifice yourself again? I met his gaze. No. He blinked. Not because he disagreed, but because the certainty in my voice startled him. "They're your parents," he said gently, not as pressure, but as acknowledgement. "I know," I replied. And I made my decision a long time ago. I looked down at my left hand. The scars were faint now, but I could still feel the ache on cold mornings, a reminder etched into skin and memory. "The moment they left me bleeding on that floor," I said quietly, "they chose a world where my life mattered less than Logan's pride." Jonah didn't argue. He nodded once. "I don't blame you," he said. "I just pity them." That word sat heavy. Pity, because pity meant they'd already lost. Ethan didn't take the news as easily. He paced the workshop that night, running a hand through his hair, jaw tight with frustration he didn't know where to put. "They're losing their house," he said. "Willow, that's huge." "I know. And you're really just going to let it happen?" I looked at him. "They let me almost die." "That's not the same," he said quickly. "I mean, it is, but it makes you uncomfortable," I finished. He stopped pacing. "I just don't want you to regret this," he said. I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm. "I regret every time I begged them to love me. I regret every dollar I sent hoping it would buy care. This," I gestured around the workshop, "this is the first decision I've made that doesn't cost me my dignity." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Later that night, while Ethan showered, my phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen in months lit up the screen. Sienna, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. I hadn't blocked her, not because I wanted access, but because I refused to let her think she still had power over my reactions. The message was short. "I heard about your parents. Cold, Willow, even for you." I stared at the words. Then another message followed. "Some people don't deserve family." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. When Ethan came back into the room, towel around his neck, I handed him the phone. He read the messages. His face hardened. "She crossed a line," he said. "Yes," I replied, "but the line was always there. She just stepped on it." Ethan typed a response, hands steady. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. All I needed was the sound of the notification that followed. Blocked. He looked at me. "I'm not negotiating your boundaries with anyone." Something in my chest loosened. Not relief. Trust. 2 weeks passed. The house was taken. My parents didn't call. They didn't ask for help. They didn't apologize. I heard through Jonah that they were staying with relatives now. Quiet, embarrassed, still insisting Logan's failure was bad luck. Logan, of course, was nowhere to be found. I stood in my workshop one evening, watching sawdust drift through the golden light, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not guilt, not satisfaction. Closure. Some losses don't require forgiveness. They require distance. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't reaching across the gap anymore. 2 years have passed. Time didn't fix everything. It just taught me how to live with what couldn't be fixed. My hands aren't as strong as they used to be. Cold mornings still wake up the nerve damage like a ghost tapping from the inside. Some days, the chisel feels heavier than it should. Some days, I have to stop early, sit down, breathe through the ache. But my hands still work. They still carve. And every piece that leaves this workshop carries something I didn't have before: choice. Rusty is older now. His muzzle has gone almost completely white, and he sleeps more than he patrols. But every morning, without fail, he drags himself up when I move, tail thumping softly like he's reminding me we're still a team. Jonah still comes by. Always coffee, always at the same time. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. That's the kind of quiet only real family can hold. Ethan stayed, not because I needed saving, but because he finally understood that loving me meant standing beside my boundaries, not trying to soften them for his own comfort. Sienna disappeared after that night. No more messages, no more commentary. Whatever power she thought she had dissolved the moment Ethan chose clarity over history. Life didn't become grand. It became honest. Late at night, when the workshop is quiet and the saw is silent, I sit under the warm yellow light and let myself think about them. My parents. Logan. I wonder where they are, if they're okay, if they ever think about me. Sometimes my hand hovers over my phone. Just one call, just one message. But then memory steps in. I remember my mother's voice, light and unbothered, as she told me to wait while I bled. I remember my father saying, "It was just a cut." I remember the sound of champagne glasses clinking while my vision blurred, and I put the phone back down. Some wounds don't heal. Some things, once lost, can't be restored. That doesn't make me cruel. It makes me careful. If you've ever been made to feel disposable by the people who should have protected you, you'll understand. If not, maybe one day you will. And when that day comes, I hope you choose yourself faster than I did.